Welcome to the Calm Analyst channel. Boris Tizenghausen is here with you. Today is July 22nd. The main news at this moment: two more Wildberries warehouses are on fire in Krasnodar and Nevinomysk. Previously, warehouses in the Moscow region and in the Tambov region were burning. In total, 4 warehouses have already been attacked. So here's my immediate question: does anyone really doubt that another 10 will burn? That is, in just one night, 2 huge Wildberries hubs in 2 neighboring regions, both over 100,000 square meters. Let's watch the video. And yet, there were those, and there still are, who don't believe that, in response to Russian strikes on our homes, our civilian infrastructure, our logistics terminals, Ukraine will simply burn everything in the swamps to hell. I think now they're starting to believe. By the way, it was a mistake not to believe. And these warehouses are burning no less fiercely than their counterpart in Elektrostal. They're just blazing, but apparently they'll burn down completely as well. And of course, a new wave of howling is rising in Russia. There are already hundreds of videos from Russians who have lost their goods, crying, saying that it's terrible. What are we supposed to do now? How are we supposed to live? We took out loans. How are we supposed to feed our children, and so on? This is not what's truly terrible. What's truly terrible is when your city is completely wiped off the face of the earth, turned into piles of charred bricks, when shells are hitting the very homes where people live. That's when you lose everything you ever had. Or when a Russian missile brings down an entire apartment entrance and whole families are killed. I think you remember these cases too. They are literally etched into my memory. Lviv and Kryvyi Rih 2024. There was literally only a 2-month difference between these incidents. The Basilevich family and the Kulik family. That is, in Lviv, the only survivor from the whole family was the husband. His wife and 3 daughters died. The same thing happened after the strike in Kryvyi Rih. There too only the husband survived. His 3 children and his wife were killed. This is the kind of grief that plunges a person into utter despair. Moreover, in Kryvyi Rih, when the Russian missile struck, the youngest girl there was only 2 months old. So this man lost his entire family all at once. This is truly horrible. In a single moment, your whole life just collapses. And unfortunately, there are many such stories in Ukraine. That is what is truly terrifying. What's truly terrifying is losing your loved ones, your family, your children, not that some underwear and towels burned somewhere. Well, maybe someone from the outside, someone not in Ukraine, will look and say, look, Ukrainians are happy about burning warehouses. Yes, maybe, but at least after this, some Russians might start to realize what they have done. They, as a country. It's not just Putin waging this war, not just Putin launching drones. In fact, it's not even Putin doing it directly. Thousands and thousands are fighting. Ukrainians never want to fight anyone. We are a very peaceful and hospitable nation. But Russia came to destroy Ukraine and Ukrainians. So what are Ukrainians supposed to do? They came to them and said, there is no such country as Ukraine, no such nation. So that's it. You will be completely wiped out. Actually, you're just Russians who have lost their way. They came to destroy an entire nation. Russia has brought immense grief to our land and continues to kill Ukrainians every day. That is the real tragedy, not those burned clothes. And as for Russia, let all their warehouses burn down if it helps end the war even a minute or an hour sooner, so be it. By the way, I did warn that everything would be burned in the swamps. For some reason, no one believed it. But this is only the beginning. And of course, things will get much worse for Russians. By the way, friends, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. I say it every time. The more of us, the reasonable people, the better. We are fighting against Putin's propaganda. Doing this together will be much more effective. So don't put it off. You can do it right now. Subscribe. At one time, the British military leader, Marshal of the Royal Air Force Arthur Harris, said the following, which is very fitting for today. The Nazis entered this war in the rather childish delusion that they would bomb everyone else, and no one would touch them. They sowed the wind, now they will reap the whirlwind. He said this on June 3rd, 1942, shortly after the first raid. If I remember correctly, it was called the 1,000-bomber raid. They bombed the German city of Cologne. Yes, and there were Germans living in those houses too, but even there, the attitude toward these bombings was ambiguous. But Harris expressed a very clear and correct idea. The Nazis thought that no one would bomb them in return. Harris was one of the main leaders of this strategic air campaign against Nazi Germany. In general, the Madyar of that time. Well, Ukraine and Ukrainians are true heroes, simply breaking Putin's strategy asymmetrically. And in every episode, we have an important fundraiser for the defense forces of Ukraine. Today, we are continuing to raise funds for mobile command posts for our air defense forces. So in this fundraiser, we have less than 10% left to collect. That is, just a tiny bit remains. If we push a little harder, we'll close out this fundraiser. For our hunters of Russian drones, and for those who shoot down missiles flying toward Ukrainian cities, for several air defense units and the 152nd Jaeger Brigade. The soldiers have recorded a video message for you. Please take a look.
152-га єгерська бригада та підрозділ перехоплювачів БПЛА Повітряних сил України звертається до канала Бориса Тізенгаузена та його підписників. Ми продовжуємо збір на 2 командних пункти. Залишилось зовсім трошки. Допоможіть нам це зробити з подвійною силою. Разом тримаємо стрій і захист нашого неба. Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Слава нації!
Смерть ворогам!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Let's help our titans. The link to the fundraiser is in the description of this video. There are mono private and PayPal options for those who want to help from abroad. And of course, there's a QR code in the corner. That's for those watching on other channels. So you can always use the QR code to go to the fundraiser. And a huge thank you to you, my dear ones, for supporting our soldiers, for supporting Ukraine. You are simply incredible. You are true strength. I've already seen several comments from Russians today. Why is this happening? Well, it's because you chose a psychopath and a maniac, and you can't stop him. Why do you even ask why? Are you satisfied now? I'm curious. The seller who's looking out the window as millions worth of goods burn, his entire business going up in flames, he's watching his warehouse on fire. Does he feel warm now, knowing that Ukraine isn't in NATO? Or maybe he's thinking, what is the US national debt? He doesn't care about that at all. You know what's most interesting? Everyone who suffered losses, the Russian Federation could, right now, this very minute, with a snap of its fingers and the right order, compensate the full value of the lost goods. But that won't happen. Do you know what will happen instead? Putin will strike Ukraine with missiles again, spending another $200, $300, $400 million on it. That's just for one attack. Just think about that. And again, it won't change anything. Absolutely nothing. Tomorrow, another 10 warehouses or 10 oil refineries will burn, or both, I hope. And life in Russia will only get worse. So what is all this for then? I want to show you one more video that, vividly answers the question, what exactly is modern Putin's Russia? The background to this video, Putin met in the Kremlin with the governor of the Jewish autonomous region, Maria Kostyuk. The conversation was about the war. So, it turns out that Kostyuk recently told Putin about a new initiative, to present the grieving parents of fallen occupiers with special medals for military valor.
Готовим такую историю, и вот именно медальон воинской доблести мы вручаем родителям. Именно родителям. Для чего? Ведь родителям важнее ничего не нужно, как знать, что их сын остался в истории своей страны, и его не гибель, а его подвиг, он сегодня важен для того, чтобы страна жила. И вот нам больше родителям ничего не нужно.
That is, the country was already living just fine before you attacked Ukraine, much better than it is now. So she says that we, as parents, need nothing more. But there's one important detail here. Maybe you've seen this video, but there's one important detail in it. She herself is the mother of a fallen, ingloriously dead Russian occupier. So she is speaking to us, the parents, directly. Her own son, Andrei Kovtun, a Russian occupier, died in August 2022 somewhere in the Donbass. There is another very telling part in the continuation of her speech. Kostyuk called the families of fallen occupiers essentially the political backbone of the state. Let me quote, This is precisely the target audience that will not only help preserve the country, but will never let anyone offend it. Never, because that would mean nullifying the sacrifice of their child. The cannibalistic logic is that these families of those who died ingloriously will be the foundation, the cement of Putin's regime. They will never question the war, because then they would have to question the payments they received for their disposed sons. Do you understand? In other words, the parents of sons whom Putin destroyed in this war do not curse Putin for it, but on the contrary, become even more devoted followers of Putin's regime. This is just monstrous. Can you imagine this situation? They idolize him. She looks at Putin like this and is happy that he buried her son. By the way, this official's career really took off precisely after her son's death. Literally 3 months after receiving the death notice, she was already sitting at the table at the meeting with Putin. Remember, he had a meeting with the mothers of the dead occupiers. Then she headed the work with the families of these war participants, then the Putin program, and later she was put in charge of an entire region. And now she herself explains to Putin that parents in Russia don't need anything else, just to know that their children died for the country and for Putin's ambitions. Do you think that's the whole madness? You know, when I open the news from the Russian Federation, it feels like a portal to hell has just opened. Here's another piece of news. You need to read this carefully. A Russian motorcyclist who calls himself a biker, in other words, a Russian motorcyclist nicknamed Surgeon, came to the unveiling of a monument to Stalin in Cherepovets and called Russia a giant motorcycle on which, I quote, "We, embracing the Savior, are flying to the heavens." This is not a joke, just in case anyone doesn't know. This Surgeon and those night wolves or whatever, basically, this Kremlin biker near the trough crowd, they shouldn't be called bikers. That's what real bikers themselves say. At best, they're just motorcyclists. So that's not all. This Surgeon thanked the governor of the Vologda region, Georgy Filimonov, for his intellect, noting, here's another quote, that only boxers could become such intellectuals. So this Filimonov, he's a boxer and a governor. What? What is going on there? By the way, if Stalin had heard this Surgeon say something about a savior, he would have at least sent him to the Gulag. Embracing the savior of Russia. Just think about it. Russia is a giant motorcycle where we, embracing the savior, are flying toward the heavens. Well, the sooner you all fly off to the heavens, the better. Honestly, I don't even know anymore. You can't tell made-up nonsense from real news here. So Bloomberg reports that Russia is ready to return to negotiations with Ukraine only after Putin achieves his goal of taking the Donetsk region. According to one of the sources, the Russian Ministry of Defense assured Putin that it would be able to establish full control over Donbass by the end of the year. Well, there's your answer, Russians. For more than 4 years, they couldn't do it when Ukraine didn't even have drones or missiles at the very beginning. And now you see, they'll supposedly manage it in half a year when Ukraine is hitting the Russian Federation harder and harder every day. Right, got it. That's the kind of logic we're dealing with. You know what? Let's solve a very simple math problem. Here's a simple one, literally, I don't know, for 3rd grade. From July 18th to July 22nd, that is, in 4 days, 4 large Wildberries warehouses burned down in Russia. How many more warehouses could burn down by the end of the year if Madyar doesn't slow down? What do you think? Obviously, there aren't that many warehouses in Russia, but still, write your answers in the comments. So by the end of the year, as the Ministry of Defense promises him, we'll conquer, we'll take Donbass, he won't have any oil refineries or warehouses left, and then something else will go. I think nothing will be left, everything will burn down. But at least they're telling him that he'll take Donbass. They told him last year, and by the end of last year he promised Trump 500 times. Yes, we'll take it now, we'll take it in the summer, we'll take it in the fall. Nothing happened. And of course, we shouldn't forget that at the same time, oil refineries, oil depots, and the tanker fleet are also burning. As part of the Unmanned Systems Forces operation, 13 more vessels were hit last night. 1 tanker, 10 cargo ships, and 2 tugboats. In total, since the 6th of this month, 196 vessels have been hit in the Black and Azov Seas, 126 in the Azov Sea, and already 70 in the Black Sea. At the same time, the Crimean switch operation continues. Last night, 13 energy facilities and substations were taken out. Everything is burning, everything is ablaze. But today, the bold chupacabra crawled out, and do you know what it declared? That everything is stable, all problems are temporary. Well, of course, everything is temporary. Of course, temporary. You'll get tapped on the crown with a snuff box, and that's it. All the problems of the Russian Federation will be over. The State Duma blamed the fifth column for stirring up the issue with fuel. Well, who else could it be? They urged Russians who complain about the gasoline situation not to behave like teenagers. And on this matter, State Duma Chairman Volodin and Deputy Isayev spoke out. According to Volodin, the country needs to be supported when it faces a crisis, not have its problems politicized. And Isayev even claimed that the problems with fuel, it's important to quote here, did not arise because something is being done wrong in our country, but as a result of the enemy's strike. The enemy struck. And why did the enemy strike, I wonder? Is there any reason for that? It's just amazing, really. Honestly, saying the enemy struck doesn't sound very patriotic or victorious at all. Just think about it. The underground heel, banging his little feet and hands on the table, proudly says, "I am announcing a special military operation." After that, tank columns and aircraft push through the border, advancing on Kiev both from Belarus and from the Russian Federation. They keep pushing, missiles are flying, aircraft are striking. Victory is just around the corner. Victory. And then suddenly, by the fifth year, it all comes down to the enemy struck. Don't lose heart, tighten your belts, we'll pull ourselves together, and so on. How did it end up like this? By the way, I came across a version from some Vatnik ghoul saying that now all the sellers from Wildberries will rush to sign contracts with the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation. Like everything they had burned down, they have loans, they have families. They need to get money somewhere, and of course they'll run off to war. It's the easiest way to earn. They won't go, not even for money. First of all, that's not their category. And secondly, even in Russia's depressed regions, far fewer people are going for money now. So basically, they've chosen a recruitment base. The depletion of the recruitment base is happening according to the so-called sociological spiral. That is, the state has already picked out the cheapest and riskiest contingent. It was during the first wave, back in 2022, that they left. Then came the prisons, convicts were sent, then the regions, well, poor regions were sent, and now even there, people don't want to go. So, each subsequent cohort requires more and more money, requires more coercion, because the pool of those willing to take the risk, even for money, is physically limited and has largely been exhausted. That's why bankrupt sellers are not added to this pool. This is an entirely different category altogether. They can leave, they can choose not to pay their loans. They would never in their lives go off to die. Well, maybe a handful, but that's clearly not what the propagandists are counting on. Well, soon, in addition to these sellers having issues with their businesses, the largest and practically monopolistic logistics network in Russia, including military logistics, could collapse. That's a fact. And what will replace it? Right now, Wildberries and Ozone, if they go under, that's it. What will replace them? There's nothing to replace them with. By the way, I happened to come across an interview with Madyar. He gave it back on the 10th, but I only saw it now. But there are 3 very short but important points in it. So the first point, this is the first war in the lives of Russians where Ukrainians are fighting not on their side but against them. And for them, well, let me put it more politely here, they're in deep trouble, says Madyar. More points. We are not hitting the Crimean bridge yet so that those who want to can escape. Let them flee across it non-stop to Russia. And one more point. Ukrainians in Crimea need to be patient while we escort the guests off the peninsula. And one more point. We will burn as many tankers as the Russians have. I think this also applies to warehouses and oil refineries. By the way, against the backdrop of Putin's falling ratings, I kept waiting for the subservient Russian agencies to start quickly churning out statements that all of this is actually for the greater good. So, do you know what VTsIOM announced? It turns out that Russians have become happier amid the fuel crisis. According to the state-run VTsIOM, the level of happiness in Russian society has increased, despite the fuel crisis, accelerating inflation, drone attacks, and loss of business. But what about all the stabbings and shootings in the lines for gasoline? Those videos of Russians crying, what are they getting out of this? Oh, so they're crying out of happiness, it turns out? Amazing. By the way, Solovyov even said that after our drone strikes, Russians lined up at military enlistment offices. Can you imagine? They're lining up at gas stations and enlistment offices at the same time, and they're very happy about it. At least that's according to the latest news from the Russian Federation. And you, friends, take care of yourselves and your loved ones. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And I kindly ask you, let's help our air defense soldiers. The link to donate is in the description of this video. We have just a little bit left to raise. Let's push together and complete the fundraiser. Have a peaceful day, everyone, and glory to Ukraine.